to fly across the ocean with the air. She has no country, she doesn't care. She is a witch, she is a fairy killing bird. She needs no passports, she's everywhere. She burns in night.
Hi everyone, how have you been? Hopefully your first week of the semester went as smooth as possible, so you didn't experience any too much major setback or letdown or any hassles. So that now they are trying to getting into the second week of the semester, which hopefully I wish should be much more pleasant and exciting. So let's get to the second lecture of this understanding life science. So here we are. Now we are actually going to take a look at the content, real content of beginning with the common characteristics of life. As I mentioned earlier in the previous week, this, so to speak, the common characteristics. Oops, by the way, I didn't even clicked the things. My bad. So this common characteristics of life, whatever it is here 7 of these were presented. However, if you search for several different versions of biology textbook, not a big surprise, but you will find some different, if not drastically different, but some of the little bit of a different definition of this. So after all, the importance of this is as I I cannot really stress this, at least personally, I believe, is not actual the list of this as a part of the whatever it is, the so-called common characteristics of all living things, but why all these in some sense can be considered to be a part of this so-called the common things of all living things, and understand the why is actually the only important thing, I guess. So here we are 7 of these presented as a like organization level, and some metabolism and being able to respond to the external environment, and something called homeostasis, and grow and develop. By the way, this growth and development is that all the living creatures can equally enjoy both of these features, which I'm going to explain later today, and reproduction and evolution finally. So let's get started with the organizational feature first. So in terms of this organization, everything is organized. Even all those machines are highly well complex organized, but the living thing, the first off is the cell is something the unique the unit of organization in the living system. So we casually state this as the cell is the basic unit of the life's organization. So everything excuse me, everything has to start with the cell. So anything not having this particular organization feature of a cell doesn't belong to this group of living thing. So something one particular example is I don't know why. This is right now it's 6:20 in the morning, and uh, keeping up with all my other distractions, so I wasn't able to have any sleep. So I stayed up all night. But still, hey, this is a Friday morning, so nothing can stop me. I can still be stay stay excited. So don't you worry. But anyway, this my voice is causing a little trouble, so bear with me. Sorry about that. So where were we? So this, okay, yeah, that guy, this virus. I don't want to even draw or try to draw that nasty coronavirus thing. Is one is because I am poor in drawing, and the coronavirus looks more complex, and so this is a type of virus infecting the bacteria, any viruses, all different types of viruses. Uh, although they are really they do have so many different features resembling us, having their genetic materials and many different things, and also affecting intimately uh, on our lives. But all these viruses are not considered to be living things because solely the very initial condition is this cell. So the virus is not organized as a cell. So although they may look very complex, highly organized structurally, but their organization is not cell-based. So sorry, you're not. Is one such criteria. Although yes, we quickly realize that how arbitrary that our the criteria of this distinguishing or drawing the line between living and non-living things. The second thing is which is very interesting things in that whether you are as an entity of living things or non-living thing which have never lived before, everything is actually everything's are made up is made up of the elements is on earth, or maybe I should say it's in the entire universe. So in other words, all this living thing, although however how much we consider ourselves as so special, but we are also nothing but just the result of these chemicals. All different bunch of chemicals came together. So the chemicals that are present inside of our cell are the exactly same chemicals that are found in the non-living things, namely some of the the fundamental chemicals as we recognize as the elements. Some of those elements more frequently found in the living systems are listed here. So C stands for. So I'm just going over with this, assuming that every one of you have never taken any science course before in your entire lives. So to some of you it may be too much elementary, but still, hey, this course is after all is designed for the targeting for non-science major students. So we have to comply with those students, those poor 문과 soul, so to speak. Kidding aside. So carbon, C stands for carbon, and hydrogen and oxygen N stands for nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, and iron, and sodium. Some people accustomed with pronouncing this natrium, but not in this place. This is gotta be a sodium, and this one. So instead of pronouncing the calcium, no, please don't. It is a potassium, and chlorine, etc. So all this, the elements, in fact, actually all these elements here, what you can see is about 120 different elements present on Earth. Although some of them are synthetic, it's not natural. So at least some of them, about 90, are naturally occurring different elements, and they are organized in certain rules so that we can handle them more conveniently and intuitively. So here, the point that I'm showing this so-called periodic table, which for those poor science majors, most of the science majors, they were forced to memorize this stupid periodic table, the orders, in their lives, and some the past lives, sometime in the high school, I presume. Those are pretty stupid things, I personally believe. But so here, among these so many, like approximately like 120 different elements, but only a handful of like this. In particular, among these are the elements most frequently, or should I say, most abundantly found in the living system, the inside of living bodies, whether you are a bacteria or you are a person. But in particular, among even these four elements, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, nitrogen, are by far the most predominant, abundant elements of all. Especially this carbon is something very interesting, because these three, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, are actually pretty much abundant in outside the system, in our atmosphere, and however the carbons are not really such an abundance. So we cannot really naturally anticipate that, because carbons are so abundant. So that's the reason why we have so much carbon in our living system. But there is another, actually a real reason why we do have this carbon so abundantly in our system. So anyway, this organization itself does not really sufficiently explain the difference between the living and non-living. So one of such questions that we might want to have is, so what's the difference between these living and non-living things? Yeah, living system is highly organized. However, that alone is not enough. So this keyword is actually the answer. The organic things. Here the two meanings. One is the macromolecules. This is very important, because if you want to build a cell, you need the big matters. So here the macro indicate that it is a big. So molecules are something that, so we just in the previous slide we looked at the element. What a handwriting. Element is that the smallest the matter which is still carrying the chemical property with the quick definition of the element is. Molecules is, on the other hand, it is a kind of compound. So two or more elements get together to make this joint venture, so to speak. Then we recognize them as molecules. But then among so many different molecules, which we are going to take a look at a little bit of this definition feature in the following chapter, which I designed. The macro means huge, relatively speaking, huge molecules. So among those molecules themselves are larger than individual element because they were the so to speak, the compound joined together by two or more different elements. But then, better yet, macromolecule means like huge, big molecules. We do have several different classes of such macromolecules, which we are going to briefly look at in the following chapter, namely the carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. Those four different macromolecules that appear in the living system. So we casually recognize them as four major types of biological macromolecules. Yes. So here the keyword, as I said, the keyword that can explain the difference between living and non-living is the presence of this organic macromolecule. Why? Is because in order to build the cell and internal this complexity, note these complex things. This complex organization inside of the cell requires to have so many different types of macromolecules. You can easily imagine how many different types of carbohydrates should we have inside of our cell, and also how many different types of lipids, and how many different types of proteins, especially the proteins are, and how many different types of, actually in the case of nucleic acids, we do have actually only two different kinds of nucleic acids. So overall, we need many different types of macromolecules in order to build and maintain this complex organizational feature of the cell. But here, then, why this organic? Organic must automatically come together with this macromolecule thing. Organic, the definition of organic is the carbon. Any compound containing carbon, although something like a carbon dioxide, which also contains the carbon, single carbon is held together by two oxygen molecules holding on here, is carbon, structure of carbon dioxide, the gas that we breathe out. So that, and in these days we have so much contribution in the increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide and then making the condition of living on Earth like shitty ourselves. Excuse my language, but this carbon dioxide is, even though this all contain carbon, but it is not normally considered one of those the organic molecule, but more complex, having 2 or 3 carbon and having some other elements attached together are definition of organic molecules. Okay? Only carbon, actually. Why the organic must always go together with these macromolecules? In order to build macromolecules, carbon is a must. So that's why you cannot have anything such wording like inorganic macromolecules. That's not possible. because inorganic is something that the elements or molecules that do not contain the carbon. Only carbon have this very unique special ability of collecting all together, including its carbon itself, collecting all together all various different kind of molecule and then build up, pile up, and making a bigger and bigger, so like huge molecules. So thanks to the carbon, which means organic, the macromolecules were possible, is the point. So here, with this, probably we can describe this difference is all this material, several different type of elements, we can consider this as a materials. They are the same materials. However, once some of them became their internal contents, starting with special boundary defining a cell. Now, this boundary probably we can view as a cell membrane. Yes. So this boundary, then you have this inside internal the matter component organized in a special way to build this macromolecule, organic macromolecule. So the organic macromolecule can only be found inside of the living system. To be more accurate, in the cell is what we can describe about the difference between living and non-living. So yes, reiterate, this life starts with a cell. But the point is here, okay, fine, the cell is very important. However, so let's start. Let's pretend that every one of us is Almighty God, Creator God, and if you were a God, to build a cell, what two most essential features, two most important and fundamental feature you would have first to create a cell, to make a living system? So one answer is, one is a cell membrane and the other one is a genetic material. Of course, other things are also necessary to make a complete functioning cell, but among them, the cell membrane, which serves as the outside boundary, and inside of this cell, the genetic material we understand as the kind of chemicals that serve as a functioning as genetic material, we know is a DNA, right? These two things are the most essential features. Like this. Why? Because cell membrane would provide the protection, making some of the boundary. So this protection issue is the first thing. What I mean by protection? So this is really a harsh, hostile environment. Yellow, I don't like yellow. So once you have this protective barrier, now the content, internal content, whatever they are, now can have a safe haven, so they can start some of the more rigorous or difficult chemical reactions to establish some of the more sophisticated products. If they were on outside, a lot of the interferences actually would have made almost impossible for such a type of useful products. So this protection issue is very important. Another thing is compartmentalization, which we are going to take a look at a little bit later, is making some internal segments. So the protection against the outside environment, and also the same type of chemical that build the cell membrane, which also can build the internal membrane inside of the cell, especially in the case of so-called eukaryote, which we are going to take a look at. There are two different types of cells. Hopefully, even those Munhwa students must have, I shouldn't say must, probably might have heard these two terms before. Let's hope. If not, no big deal. I will explain this, so don't you worry. So anyway, prokaryote and eukaryote, two different types of cells. But anyway, especially in the case of eukaryotic cell, this compartmentalization, meaning that internal segmentation with the membrane, is another very important, functionally speaking, issue. So anyway, these, whether as a protection or compartmentalization provider, this cell membrane is very important. So here already two different type of cells are shown here. The one on your left represent so-called the prokaryotic cell. Is very relatively very simple cell. Here, this one is a eukaryotic cell, which represent even Earth. So a lot of this, different living organisms, including animals and plants, and also humans. Humans are part of an animal. They are actually, their cells are made up or based on the eukaryotic cell like this. And the eukaryotic cell, as you can see, inside, like, not only do they have this external membrane feature, cell membrane, but inside they do have, with the same chemicals, same material, they build this internal network of all these membranes like this. Some membranes look more interesting looking things, and these are all collectively called organelles, which we are going to take a look at shortly after. So, and about this genetic material enables this living form, life actually being continuous. We can just keep going on and on. So we are, so to speak, due to this genetic material and the reproduction, we are virtually living forever. As long as you get to produce your offspring, your sons and daughters, you are practically living forever. So this perpetuation of life, make the life continuous, is very important. In other words, let's say if this cell membrane thing did not get to contain any genetic material inside, and then this whole organization thing would have been very short-lived. So it was fun while it lasts, but not any longer. However, this structure inside, if they somehow luckily contain this type of genetic material, and this genetic material has a special ability to reproduce itself, so it duplicates and make the cell divide into two, and then keep going on this same procedure. And that's the reason here we are, like several billion years ago, the life started in this form, and then we basically have the same feature of this, having this genetic material and the cell membrane. So here we are, two types of cells. So having this prokaryote and eukaryote thing. So looking at the prokaryote first, prokaryotes means literally means that before the nucleus. Pro means here not professional but before. So prokaryote means these cells appeared even before the first nucleus. Nucleus is a special feature, as you can see in this diagram. Look at this. This is one such special membrane within which this is the DNA or chromosome, our genetic material. Look at this prokaryote. Their DNA, the genetic material, is naked, so to speak. They don't have any such boundary, protection boundary, no. So this is one distinctive feature between pro and eukaryote. Prokaryote do not have such membrane-bound nucleus that can protect their genetic material. And another thing is this membrane-bound organelles. They don't have any such things like internal membrane made segment is the organelle. So these are the cationic version of the prokaryotic cells. None of them have any nucleus or the membrane-bound organelles. Why do we have to specifically mention the membrane-bound thing organelles? Is because here in this diagram, this little speck-like things must represent the snowman-like called ribosome. So in this cartoon, this is depicted as one just single small tiny dot, but in cell scale, ribosome is also very huge structure, very big structure. And so some biologists consider these ribosomes as the organelles, but obviously these ribosomes are not a membrane-bound structure. This is made up of the mixture of proteins and the nucleic acid, actually. So in order to distinguish this, the ribosomes, because prokaryote do also have this ribosome, because no one can survive without ribosome, because their function, the ribosome's function, is to make the protein synthesis. So that's why we actually distinguish the difference between pro and eukaryote as a presence or absence of the membrane-bound organelle. It's a very silly little detail. And another important thing is their size is very small. Yeah, all the prokaryotes. Bacteria, yeah, you can, if you want to actually quickly remind yourself what the example of a prokaryote is, so look at it, think of bacteria. Yes, so very small, relatively speaking, compared with the other type, the eukaryotes, and all of them are unicellular, which means each individual cell is their own, the individual organism. So they are, all of them are independent. Each single cell is independently living. Is a definition of a unicellular, single-celled organism. Here, the more realistic, the micrograph of the comparison between typical prokaryotic cell. It must be one of these the bacteria living in our guts, and this is one of our animal cell features. So it's a big difference. Actually, the difference between is 1 to 10. Like if this diameter of the prokaryotic cell is on average is 1 micrometer. 1 micrometer is 1 millionth of a meter. It's really tiny. The length or the measurement, whereas this whole diameter of the eukaryotic average typical eukaryotic cell is a 10 micrometer. So this much difference is in terms of volume, it is a huge difference, isn't it? So this eukaryotes, all of these eukaryotes originally evolved from prokaryote, which means in the beginning, and the very first early days of this life evolution, speaking, all of them were prokaryotes, and then some of those small portion of the prokaryotes somehow were able to manage to develop into change their form into the other form we now recognize as eukaryotes. So this is a cartoonic representation of typical eukaryotic cells. So not only do they have this nucleus, but they have all these extra features of all of them enclosed in a membrane. So this large size is actually some reason. There is some reason why once you become a eukaryote, you are able to enjoy the larger size. There is a reasons why. It all actually is related with the energy metabolism. The eukaryotes are able to utilize their energy metabolism in much higher efficiency. Okay? So they are able to withdraw or provide a larger amount of energy, and so that they can afford to have a bigger size. Okay? Another thing is, but the other side of this, on the spectrum, or the flip side of this, is these organelles are actually, you may think actually these organelles are some luxury feature, so that if you imagine if you were in the other shoes of prokaryote, some might wonder actually, is that, hey, although I'm a prokaryote, but I also like to have this one of those so-called the membrane-bound organelle. Why can't I? Why only those eukaryote can have all those goodies like organelles? I also want to have one of those. Why? Why do you think all those prokaryotes don't have any organelles, whereas eukaryotes have all the eukaryotes have these organelles? Actually, it turns out that these organelles are not something like a luxury, but it is a must. So thanks to this organelle, as I mentioned earlier, this lecture, this so-called compartmentalization was possible. What do I mean by this? Compartmentalization is mean that you have this internal defined space. So imagine they were all evolved from prokaryotes, which were small in size. When you were prokaryote, internal metabolism, all these chemical reactions inside must have been straightforward. Everything. What's the basics of chemical reaction? You grab one compound and you grab another compound and then combine together, and voila, you have a new product. This is ABC, basic ABCs of chemical reactions. So, like in the living system, usually those chemical reactions are catalyzed by enzymes. So if you're an enzyme, you grab this and grab the other, boom, this. So it's so easy because you are living in the very small boundary of things because you are prokaryote. But then you all of a sudden become eukaryote. Because by virtue of being a eukaryote, because you are able to provide a larger amount of energy, so you can afford to become big, larger structure. Now you become you found a little bit of a problem. Why? Because you were trying to get this chemical reaction as you were before, but it became more difficult. You want to grab one compound and then try to find another one, and the other one is all the way down there. So you have to run up there to grab that guy, and then then the other guy also escapes from your control. That's a big problem. So instead, you have to actually come up with some kind of measure that prevent such a thing from happening. So you just confine those old chemical reactions within these small sections. That's the definition of the compartmentalization. So each small space defined by this organelle, membrane-bound organelle, now is become the place of a specific, very special chemical reactions. So that's a very important feature. So actually you can develop many very specialized chemical reactions, but also, like I said, on the other hand, that is something very the essential and must have a feature. Without it, you cannot function as a larger size eukaryotes. That's how I see it. So as we go along throughout this semester, you will be able to witness actually the real example of such compartmentalization occurring in the eukaryotic cell. Okay, now, unlike the prokaryotes, all of which are simply unicellular in terms of the cellular organization, in eukaryotes you have options actually. So you can stay as a unicellular if you like, but you have actually new options to become a multicellular. Okay, here. So like unicellular organisms are examples of unicellular organisms are yeast. Yeast is even though yeast is very bacteria looking like a small tiny unicellular cells, but they are eukaryotes having all those internal organelles and nucleus. And the group of very diverse different eukaryotic organisms collectively we call as a protist. Most of these protists are unicellular organisms too. Some of them are actually multicellular. And here, some people think why bacteria should be included in this eukaryote. No, that's not what I meant. Bacteria is another example of unicellular, but obviously we all know that bacteria are not eukaryotes. They are prokaryotes. So examples of unicellular organisms are all these three. There are only three different types of organisms that are unicellular. So one is bacteria, which is prokaryote, and yeast and protist. And all the others, like more familiar with us, plants, animal, and the mushrooms and fungus, they are all multicellular organisms. Okay. Here the multicellularity only became possible after the evolution of the eukaryote is because this energy. Once again, this energy utility. In order to become multicellular, the big-bodied organism, you should be able to come up with a way of providing a huge, large amount of ATP. So these plant, animal, and moles are the example of the multicellular organisms. And here is another very important requirement for being a multicellular, which is this differentiation. So these multicellular organisms are actually organized into some special hierarchical organization of like the lower level and a higher level and a further higher level of this type of hierarchical organization that we are going to take a look at in this lecture. And this organization pattern is in particular at the level of these tissues and organ system. These three systems really clearly indicate the example of so-called differentiation. Like all the cells. Multicellularity doesn't in itself does not really mean they are true multicellular organism. If you do not go through this differentiation. So having tens of tens of thousands of different cells, but if you fail in differentiating them into very specific different types of tissues and gather those specific different types of tissues into forming organs, and some of the organs working together in the organ system, then you are not at all any true multicellular organisms, but you are simply called what? Cancer. The cancer is a very good example of cancer is a very good example of like not having any differentiation, but simply piling up the number of different cells in lump sum of these different cells, so-called undifferentiated. And we all know that what to do with this cancer, right? So here there's a kind of a summary of this the comparison between prokaryote and a eukaryote. One may think that, oh, so the prokaryotes were like a eukaryote. This is the representation of a eukaryotic cell, especially the multicellular eukaryotic cell. If you look closely, there are so many differentiated in function-wise and big-bodied things. So they are able to perform many different specialized functions thanks to that. As you can read this, you can have this predation, and they do have a defense system specialized, and the motor system perversion and digestion. Yeah, this is a type of a typical eukaryotic cell. Fine. So this is a, you may actually think, so this eukaryote, like as I said, eukaryotes are the one got evolved from prokaryotes. So you may easily think that, okay, so the prokaryote cells are the primitive, okay, like the old, obsolete, primitive, but then we are the advanced version of. So if these prokaryote cells are like those very old, not functioning and hardly functioning computer, and these eukaryotes are really new modern computers. No, that is not the case. Although these prokaryotes, yes, yeah, these prokaryotes are simple, but not primitive. Why? Because whether you are prokaryote or whether you are eukaryotes, they all are subject to the process of evolution. So they just kept changing themselves to accommodate the environmental change along with this time. So those prokaryotes lived several billions years ago in the beginning were not the same prokaryote as you see in these days prokaryotes. So that's the point. Yeah, okay. Another thing that we want to take a look at is this hierarchical organization of life as a multicellular organism, especially this hierarchical organization is really prominent. It's not saying that the prokaryote don't have any of this hierarchical organization, but so this several different higher order of categories appeared in this type of organization, which is a typical feature of living system. So like starting with molecule, I have already explained what molecules are. Some of the bigger stuff as a result of what combined elements. And then those big molecules, especially those major organic macromolecules, are important in building this cell. And you have so many cells. If you are a multicellular organism, then some specific cells having the same function organized into specific tissues. We all know that different example of tissues in our body, and different tissues also come together and make up some of the organ, especially the example of the organ we can easily name: eyes and brain and heart, and we name them. And then organ systems are the type of working together systems of several different organs for the big function. Okay. Just like that. So all these examples and explanations will provide. So later, if you are interested in, hopefully you already know, but if you're not, then you can just read this thing to remind yourself or educate yourself. Hey, don't move, let's go, don't move. But this hierarchical organization does not stop at the individual level. Beyond this individual level, this hierarchy expands. So here, after the organism, one single individual organism, now there's one another higher organizational category called the population. If the population consists of one single species, okay, so the human population, or particular fish population, or particular flowering plant population, occupying in a specific area. Okay. Although realistically speaking, in a given space or area, local area, it is not likely that you get to find only one single population. However, among many different types of populations coexisting, you can simply refer the one individual specific population. That is the concept that we want to use. So the population. So all together, so several different types of population together mixed in a given local location, then what? We designate or recognize that as a community. And then community, when that particular community embrace their affecting environment, including climate and etc., those environment affecting their lives, then we collectively all together call them as an ecosystem, which is a kind of familiar term to almost all of us. And then eventually the organizational category is biosphere, the entire earth affecting or supporting the life, including our atmosphere and our earth, the crust is the part of this biosphere. Don't move, okay? And here, the hierarchical organization. Oh, do I have to move this thing again? Shoot. This hierarchical organization then have the addendum, so to speak. So whenever you have this type of a thing, especially in the living system with this hierarchical organization, you never miss finding this particular feature called the emergent property. Definition of this emergent property is the sum of the individual thing is greater than the arithmetic sum of its individual component, is what probably you can describe. So it's a little more fluent description we can say is that the whole is greater than the little sum of the component. What does it mean by that? Is as you go over to a higher level of this organization, you always get to see some new characteristics, new properties that was not observed in the lower level. So I give you this example as always, like my preferred example. So look at, think of a brain, which is simply nothing but a collection of your nerve cell. The name of nerve cells is neuron. So many, like billions of neuron cells get together and then build up this one particular organ, brain. However, no matter how hard you study individual neuron cell inside their, so to speak, their physics and chemistry, so then how it functions, so you mastered how it works in all each bit of the components. So now you become so confident that, hey, try me. So since I know everything about the neuron cell, so simply it's just a bit of, if you put together all these things, then you can expect how it works. One very good example is how the mechanism of how this wristwatch functions. Seemingly, the mechanism of working must be very complex. So one of the straightforward way of figuring out how it works is you just disassemble every component and then study each component function, and then you just do the reverse engineering. So, okay, now I know how this watch function. It's very typical way of performing any learning thing in science in particular. Okay. But here it doesn't work. No matter how hard you do this, in the case of this neural cell, you cannot understand why all of a sudden something like so-called intelligence, or like emotions like love or hate or those things, where do they come from? This is one example of such emergent property. So every different level can you find such examples. So as you go up, this and more new features emerge. So may actually think, so that's the emergent property which is unique to living things. So we cannot do anything about it because this is like something that living thing does. No, it's not actually. You know what? Actually, this type of so-called emergent property, if you call that as an emergent property, that is not something that you can only find in living things. Non-living thing, you in many occasions find similar things. One example, the bicycle. If you disassemble each component of the bicycle and then spread them on the garage floor, as an individual that doesn't know anything about this mechanics, how it works, the bicycle, then to the eyes of such Almor, you don't have anything. You have no idea about it. So no matter how hard you carefully look at individual piece of this bicycle, but you cannot figure out what it does. But once that the bicycle mechanic walks in and then assemble back these components to make a complete bicycle and then ride it away, just you stay in a shock and awe. Wow, emergent property, right? That's exactly what we do in this complex system of biology. So it is not something the truly emergent property. What's emergent property? It is something like a manifestation of this complexity that you did not get to understand yet. Then you only just recognize it as something new, emergent property. If you knew better, you could, theoretically speaking, you could predict how it works even. Okay, so as I mentioned, the example of this wristwatch figuring out the function, in that case it worked. This so-called reductionist approach. You study only individual component and then put them back together, all together, to understand the overall entire thing's function. But there is always a limitation. It's been very useful, efficient way of studying science, but not anymore. Once you just reach it to a certain limit, and then more complexity now actually attack you, and then there's no way you can do anything about this. This is a very famous illustration actually describing the case of this, whatever this emergent property is actually intrinsic to this failing in understanding this complexity and then not being able to predict correctly. So say this individual piece, there are several different ways actually you can put together to create this or that even. So by only studying this individual piece, can you predict which of these actually be made eventually? No, you can't. However, if you are a super intelligent genius, then you can consider every different type of possible algorithm. Then maybe in the future you may be able to actually correctly predict. So artificial intelligence, maybe if any artificial intelligence sitting, please, would you please stand up, is what probably we can hope for. So because of that, so that after realizing such a limitation, the way we study in the field of biology has drastically changed into have this so-called holistic approach. Is this a system biology? So to perform such a system biology under that premise, we need a lot of help from computer. But the thing is, the objective is to consider all these possible interactions. Before, we just ignored, because it was too complex, we ignored any possible interactions among different part of components in the living cell. However, we should incorporate that possibility as much as we can in the system biology, and with that, if we can successfully do, then probably we can have a better chance of correctly predicting the outcome. Is what is the so-called systems biology is trying to achieve. So this particular the name of this particular department at the Sungmyeong Women's University has been changed into. So when I first got here, actually the name of this department was this, simply Department of Biology, changed into Department of Life Science. Sounds a little bit more glorious. Now changed into Department of, not the department anymore, Division of Systems Biology. Yeah, that's what it is. With that, I think we need to accomplish a little more than this. So give me a little more time to quickly go through until I can reach to the the intended point. So let's continue on to the next subject, which is metabolism. So the definition of the metabolism is all the chemical reactions occurring in the living system. But this this is the nature of all these chemical reactions. This is all about the energy transactions, and so is this metabolism. So it involves, naturally, inevitably involves the energy transactions. But to the living things, actually, this is more critical. Life and death matters because without this metabolism, there is no way you can survive. Because through metabolism, the reason why metabolism occur in the living system is with that they have to obtain the energy and they have to they have to use the energy. That's the reason why they do have this metabolism. So this metabolism itself involves the energy transaction in the form of either it obtains the energy from somewhere, or as a result of the reaction metabolism, you just release your stored energy. Either way, so this cell, even if you are a single cell, still a complex enough. And then if you want to survive, you have to provide some of the energy. The big problem is you cannot self-generate the energy. There is a real big the rule on top of this whole thing set by the physics, so-called the first law of thermodynamics, which is nothing but an energy conservation rule. So which states that you cannot create your energy. No way. There is no way. Energy is there in the universe. The only thing you can do about the energy is you get some from somebody in the form of a specific energy. And also you cannot destroy energy. There is no way you can. You can only change or convert one specific energy into different form. So you're in a big dilemma. In order to survive, in order to sustain yourself, you have to get some energy, but there is no way you cannot self-generate internally in your system. So you always have to get some energy from outside the source, whatever forms. So that's why it becomes necessary for us to do this all different metabolism. So like I said, this first law of thermodynamics, specifically a second rule, is you cannot do anything about. No, you can create or you cannot destroy it. Only you can transform from one to another. So what can you do in order to get the energy? So you have to, that's the reason why you have to get some food. What's the definition of a food? Food is to be destroyed. You digest. Digest is such a nice word of simply smashing and destroying and breaking it down into pieces. Why do you do that? This food molecule contains some big chunk of internal original energy. So I want to scavenge your energy, so break them, and then get the energy released. Now the second thing is, once you have this released energy, you have to somehow come up with the way of converting into some of a more convenient form. Like you should be able to put your energy released from your food molecule into some storage, okay? So that later you can take that energy out to use it when you need it. So this is like a depiction of such thing in the as a cell. Food molecule enters your system. Why? Because they need to be destroyed, and this process of being destroyed is called catabolic reaction. So it's a catabolic pathway. So now the big food molecules are broken into pieces. Why do you do that? Because you want to extract the energy throughout that process. Although you have some of those waste in the form of heat. But sometimes this heat is also useful because so that you can warm up your body. If you are like a mammals like us, then you also need this type of waste of this energy transaction. And then with this energy, what are you going to do with this? Then you use this energy to make some of your synthetic procedure or maintenance stuff. Okay? And those type of synthetic reaction direction, we call that as an anabolic reaction. So here, this anabolic pathway is the descriptions, and you build the macromolecules. So from small molecules, pieces, to build the big macromolecule, this is something that takes the energy. So before getting into the actual specifics of this so-called catabolic or anabolic reaction, let's take a look at this second law of thermodynamics, which is about the entropy. So if the first law of thermodynamics is about the energy conservation, the second law of thermodynamics concerns the degree of disorderliness, how messy it is in a system. Try to describe. So this entropy is something that that describes or determines the relative, the disorderliness of a given system. And what it states, the second law of thermodynamics states, is that the total entropy of the entire universe will always increase or stay the same over time. It's keep increasing. It will keep expanding, so it will become more chaotic, is what it states. So this is one ever expanding universe, so that their entropy will just keep increasing. So, like I said, the definition of entropy is degree of disorderliness. Here. So this is like a very good description of entropy, what entropy is, and the second law of thermodynamics. According to the second law of thermodynamics, the higher entropy thing is a more disorderly, like chaotic things. And over time, any system will move naturally or spontaneously will move from even if the system was initially a very orderly, well-organized state, it will become over time to more disordered, unorganized state is what the second law of thermodynamics. And the way we describe this each state is this highly organized state having lower entropy, whereas this unorganized, messy state has a higher entropy. That's a natural thing. Well, intuitively you can think, when anybody smokes still, if you just pop out your cigarette smoke, then the cigarette smoke will spread out. Initially the smoke was in a very small, highly concentrated area, and then they get to spread out. This is another good example of such increasing entropy. So without you doing anything, if you just let it out, then they will spontaneously go spread out according to the following the rule of so-called the second law of thermodynamics. gut. Okay. However, actually, more accurately, the way you can view this is this. Actually, the entropy is about the probability. Imagine this. Within this closed container, if you had this 9 molecules, what's the probability of you see these 9 molecules tightly organized in this array and then occupying only very small space within this whole entire compartment, rather than they are being spread out or getting all over the places? The probability is this one is, so if you just keep observing this, then the likelihood, the probability of you finding this the higher entropy status is getting higher and higher. That's what actually the second law of thermodynamics about entropy states. Another way of saying this is, which of the two is more likely? If you're like on top of a truck, if you toss the brick loaded on the truck, if you toss to the ground, which of the two, like the probability of those tossed bricks get highly organized way that stack together like this versus this disorganized form of they are forming a pile? Obviously, this is what, according to the rule of entropy, second law of thermodynamics. So, having said that, any chemical reactions or activities that will result in the entropy increase will happen spontaneously, because that's more likely. That's the thing that will you anticipate, that expect to occur. Okay? And that is also energetically more favorable, because that is more stable in terms of energy. It's more stable. Why? Because this kind of well-organized state, in terms of it takes energy in order to maintain such highly, so to speak, artificially organized states. It takes energy, and so it contains higher amount of energy to maintain this. Whenever you have a higher energy, that thing bearing the higher energy is more unstable than well disorganized having lower energy. That's another natural rule. Okay. I wish the wealth for people also follows that same rule, so that we don't have any nonsense as we see in these days. But unfortunately, that doesn't always follow this natural rule. So anything that will occur spontaneously will result in the increase in the entropy. Why? Because it is energetically more favorable than the other way around. Okay? That doesn't mean that you can never achieve this reverse reaction of from higher entropy to lower entropy. If you do work, you can intuitively imagine this scenario. Even if initially you have this messy pile of the bricks, you just get down, and then you do your own work to pile this thing one by one. Then you can achieve this lower entropy status of this brick things. But only after you put in some your work, which means the energy. In order to do this work, you have to spend your energy. In other words, if you want to make any system coming from higher entropy to the lower entropy, which is reverse to the spontaneous way of direction of the reaction, all you gotta do is put some energy. Okay? So this cell itself is a very the entity of having very low entropy, yeah, because it is well organized, highly ordered. So if you want to maintain this, then it is non-spontaneous. So you have to keep providing the energy to maintain this. Highly ordered, more disordered, increase entropy. The reverse is non-spontaneous. So if you want to do that, put in some energy. So having figured out that, hopefully, now two different types of chemical reaction. One is called the catabolism, which is catabolism is a breaking down from larger, more complex molecule into smaller pieces. So to speak, the big polymer to become individual piece of monomers. It is one straightforward example of a catabolism. So that this now, hopefully we can understand this must be a spontaneous reaction, because by breaking down, you make them increase the entropy, right? So you just follow the entropy. If any reaction is going to be spontaneous or non-spontaneous, if you want to determine, then what is the end result? Would it be something that result in the increased entropy? Then yes, it will be spontaneous, because that is going to be energetically more favorable. So what about the energy then? Would it release the energy, or would it absorb or require the input of energy? Obviously, it is a spontaneous reaction, so it will release the energy, because after the increase the entropy, which become more stable in terms of energetically, the internal energy stored in the original system must have been released like this. So you don't have to do anything in terms of energy. The energy will be released automatically. So the food, that's the reason why you break down the food, so that you can get the energy extracted, so that you can convert those energy into something else. Okay, so because it is energy is released, so another name of calling this catabolism is called the exergonic reaction. Externally, energy is released. The other opposite direction of reaction is anabolism. So it's a synthetic from small compound to the big polymeric compound. This. So obviously you will create the lower the entropy, which will require the energy input, because it is non-spontaneous reaction, right? So it will require the energy, and because of that, it's called endergonic. Internally, energy is going into the endergonic reaction like this. So here, this is a very good example of the two-way street of catabolism and anabolism that we are going to take a look at sometime later in the later following chapters. So the metabolism occurring constantly in our cell is after consuming the food, and basically food consists of one representative of ingredient in a food is this glucose molecule having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The black dots represent always in this model the carbon, 6 carbon glucose molecule. With the help of this oxygen, now you perform this specific catabolism in which the glucose is broken down into small pieces of carbon dioxide and water. So it's a breakdown reaction, catabolism. So obviously it will release the energy. Here the ATP was described in parentheses, but it is not entirely accurate thing. The initial energy released is not anything about in the form of ATP, but this energy will be used to synthesize the ATP. On the other hand, from the other end, starting from carbon dioxide and water, you can do this reverse direction if you are lucky enough to be another type of organism like plant. Since this is an anabolic reaction, synthetic, from smaller to larger molecule, example of an anabolism, so the requirement is you must provide the energy, here in the form of light energy. So that's why we call this process as a photosynthesis, right? So it just keep recycling this whole in terms of this carbon matter. So the ATP appeared over here. Is this ATP is a particular chemical that every living cell, whether you're a bacteria or human or anything else, as the universal energy source. So to speak, it is an energy currency. Universal, like US dollar that can be used in everywhere, anywhere, everywhere in the world. The ATP serves the similar function. So ATP is so convenient, so that somehow all the living things still dependent on their energy transaction on this ATP molecule. ATP is synthesized from ADP, and after breaking down into ADP, it releases energy. It sounds familiar? So this is a chemical structure of ATP, which none of you have to worry about memorizing anything, but simply to give you an idea about. So I just put this thing up here. So particular later on, it will revisit you when we take a look at the nucleic acid. Then I am going to bring this thing up again, this structure. However, anyway, here the thing that we want to focus on is only three particular, the yellow, this part. You have a three repeating unit of, its name is a phosphate group. That's why actually it has a name of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, 1 to 3 triphosphate. And at the catabolic reaction, the part that is broken is here at this junction to become having only 2 phosphate. That's why it will become now ADP. Now D stands for diphosphate. So it will, after catabolic breakdown of this ATP, ATP will become the ADP. So now it is a catabolic reaction, so the energy will be released. This is the thing. Okay? So from ATP, the ATP is the energy currency, it's a universal energy. So you get to use this, and after this chemical reaction, 1 phosphate is got released, and energy is also released as a result, and then you use this energy, right? Now another thing is, so you should be able to somehow get this ADP back into ATP. So to speak, it is this ATP and ADP works like rechargeable battery. Okay, you use up the battery and then you just put in the plug and recharge it. So to convert this ADP back into ATP, you need to provide some energy, right? And this energy comes from where? Your hamburger and the rice bowl or any food will provide after breaking them down. Is the whole this a cycle? Okay? So this ATP energy, whatever the catabolic and anabolic, however, in reality, the chemical reaction, whether it is a catabolic or anabolic reaction, without the help of an enzyme, virtually no chemical reaction can occur spontaneously in the living system. I mean, spontaneously or with anything. Okay. So even if that is a catabolic reaction that is to occur spontaneously, in order for you to make it practically happen, you have to get the help of the enzyme. That the reason, more detailed reason why you still need an enzyme, even if that's in the case of a catabolic reaction. Hopefully, I should be able to explain in the following chapter. Okay. So with that, I will stop the first session of this lecture right now here, and it's already 1:30, but what can I do? So I will just follow the next section.
I tell you a story about a girl. She likes to fly across the ocean with the air. She has no country, she doesn't care. She is a witch, she is a fairy killing bird. She needs no passports, she's everywhere. She burns at nights in Paris, breakfast in the Louvre. She drinks tequila, she's getting high. She pressed the 35 world up in the sky. Manhattan, the queen, lost in a dream. You left your home when you were only 17. You turned the whole with a spin, lost in an everlasting dream. Manhattan queen. She changes love